Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere mai, and welcome to this week's episode of The Niche Cast. We are from theniche-case.com, where you can find all sorts of Aotearoa sporting yarn and kōrero, most of which we are here to discuss today on today's episode of The Niche Cast. Big up yourself. Hope you're doing well around Aotearoa and the whole wide world. Big up to everyone who supports us via Patreon and the paid Substack subscription. We've got a big old meaty podcast. I think we went for an hour, which is try give back to the subscribers a bit more as well. And we went deep into the Ashes and any connections to Aotearoa through the Black Caps. We also compared the Ferns, the tall ferns, football ferns, and white ferns on that subscriber pod. And there are a few Warriors thoughts earlier in the week, which probably don't matter right now because we're here to preview their upcoming game against Parramatta Eels. But make sure you check that out if you are part of the Patreon whānau or you do have a paid subscription on Substack. Those come out on those feeds every Tuesday along with the Variety Show. And those are the best ways to support the Niche Case and all our content directly. It's as little as $1 a month. That's all you need to do. You can do more. Don't know if you can do less. Can't do 50 cents a month, but it's not much, $1 a month. And that is just a good way to support us directly straight up the guts. But also your presence here now with us in honor of Aotearoa and Aotearoa sport is more than enough. Just tell a friend, subscribe on YouTube. We're just trying to get the YouTube numbers up. So if you can, subscribe and like and comment and just help us out with these weird old algorithms, that would be great. Check in with the website every day, theniche-case.com. We're doing lots of like Kiwi sporting clips on Twitter, Instagram, and the YouTube shorts as well. So we're just doing our best, and all you need to do is just enjoy the yarns, enjoy the kōrero, and there are other ways to support us however you see fit as well. Whatever you can do is all good. We do have the Substack email newsletter coming out tomorrow, and that is going to be a bumper dumper full of Aotearoa sporting notes and nuggets, which I will touch on what I'm going to write tomorrow in a jiffy. But it is the best way to support to get all the Niche Case content delivered straight to your email every Monday and Friday evening. Not only do you get the Niche Case sent straight to you, the links to our latest blog posts and all the links to our podcast, we write things specifically for the email newsletter every Monday and Friday evening as well. Before we discuss some Aotearoa sporting matters, we need a dose of mindfulness. Nico the Wildcard, what do you got?
Well, luckily, I have a dose of mindfulness, which I picked up while I was doing some reading last night, finishing off a Cormac McCarthy book that I started recently. And there's a line in there that went, between the wish and the thing, the world lies waiting. And I thought, that's a good one. I'm going to use it. And I took a photo of the page, I highlighted it, I stocked that up for the podcast today. Between the wish and the thing, the world lies waiting, which I think in the context of the book was slightly different to how we probably present the context here. It was a little bit darker in the Cormac McCarthy fashion in the novel, but I think for us, it's quite easy to pivot that quote into like the ambition and the end goal, and then the world lies between those things, right? Like it's the journey where everything happens, the process, one might say.
Yeah, the journey, the process. Also, if you want to get super mystical and esoteric, it is a bit like the manifestation, because the wish is like
Definitely.
is the idea emerging. It's the thing. It's not the thing. Sorry. Let me use the correct terminology of today's mindfulness. The wish is the idea, the thought, I'm going to do this. Oh, I want to do that. Well, I'd like this to happen for me one day. And before you get to the manifestation point, before you get to the thing, is the world. because that how whatever it is, maybe it's 10 years, maybe it's 20 years, maybe it's 1 year, maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's a freaking week if you're a super duper manifester. Clearly not
5
me.
minutes.
Mine's like more like
I want to manifest a sandwich.
I feel like I'm in a lifetime of manifestation, so I'm maybe the ancestors as well, so I'm going 100 years, from wish to thing. But that is the world, because that's where you learn about yourself. That's where you learn about
Yeah.
what you really want. That is how you learn to apply gratitude and to be present and all those things, because you're only going to get to the thing. You're only going to manifest what you want when you're operating from that place of peace and calm and gratitude. And that's the world, baby.
And key point that you made in there as well, the thing doesn't exist until the wish exists. Like that's the manifestation. The thing doesn't come into, I mean, you're not going to get there if you don't know what you're looking for, right? It's when when you bring the wish into existence, the end goal suddenly becomes a factor because you've defined it. Like that's how it becomes real. And of course, yeah, then you've got to go through the entire world to get to that point. But it's through the wish that the thing becomes a thing, so to speak.
Shout out to Big Man Thingy. Or the
Yeah.
old timers remember Thingy, and he's a thing, and shout out to him. What I am going to be writing for the email newsletter tomorrow, Friday, is just some notes on the domestic cricket contracts, which are slightly more relevant than the Black Caps slightly more relevant than the White Ferns contracts, that are a lot more relevant than the Black Caps contracts. But that is only because they tell us about the player movement. So what I've usually done is each year I've done like a domestic contract roundup for every team. In my journey of enlightenment and learning about these contract situations, I'm probably just going to move towards more like a Otago preview, Wellington preview, Canterbury preview, as opposed to focusing on the contracts, because I am learning that those contracts don't even mean much. And in domestic cricket, you can still play every single game of domestic cricket without a contract. Same with the Black Caps and White Ferns. So that's why I'm moving towards just the overall previews. But there are some like headline bits that headline moves that are overriding all the coverage here. We did know that Fenelon was leaving Wellington to go back to Auckland. We did know Kyle Jamieson was leaving Auckland to go back to Canterbury. And now the first round of announcements, we've got Cam Fletcher leaving Canterbury to go back to Auckland. He came up through Auckland, and then I think he spent a few years at Northern Districts before going down to Canterbury. So you do have those kind of bigger moves that are happening on, like the Otago duo, Michael Ray and Michael Rippon moving up to Canterbury from Otago. There are those moves that are somewhat interesting. What is really perking my antenna up is what those moves mean for younger players. And the most important one here is Mitch Hay, who is going to basically be the full-time wicketkeeper for Canterbury. And it's an interesting journey, because Ben Horn retired as the Auckland wicketkeeper. So Auckland needed a wicketkeeper. Canterbury basically have two really good wicketkeepers, Cameron Fletcher and Mitch Hay. And yeah, it's funny how these, like, I don't know how, like, these moves are spun one way. I've got my own perception. Obviously, I don't know the reality, but I do know that Mitch Hay is a really good young wicketkeeper. And if Cameron Fletcher was the wicketkeeper for Canterbury, then Mitch Hay is just playing as a batter, but he is a really good wicketkeeper. I'd say Mitch Hay is probably the best young wicketkeeper batter in Aotearoa right now, and I think that was a large factor in Cameron Fletcher moving to Auckland. Yeah, it's good for family. Yeah, there's an opportunity in Auckland with Ben Horn retiring, but also Mitch Hay is a really good young wicketkeeper batter, and let's check out his career stats. 10 games of first-class cricket, batting average of 42. Let's round it up to 43. 10 games, 7 scores over 50 for Mitch Hay. He's really good at cricket, and he's going to get a lot more game time as the wicketkeeper batter for Canterbury now that Cameron Fletcher's moved up to Auckland. There was also Luke Georgeson has moved from Wellington to Otago, which I think is a really good move for him. He had been in the Wellington system as a really talented youngster. He flirted with moving to Ireland. That was the situation last year. Kind of gave up his contract to take up opportunities with Ireland. Then he backflipped on that to stay with Aotearoa. Didn't really kick on that much last season, but now he moves to Otago. And this gives Otago, what do we know about Otago? They've got a lot of really, well, I don't think many people know this. There is a bit of anxiety about Otago cricket, but they've got a lot of really good young cricketers in Otago that I'm fascinated by. Luke Georgeson, really good all-rounder. Dean Foxcroft is basically the next best batter outside of the Black Caps. Thorne Parks is a really good batter. Jacob Cummings on the rise. You've got Dale Phillips. Ben Lockrose had a breakout super smash. Lou Johnson is just a funky old cricketer. There's a lot of talent in that Otago team, and Luke Georgeson is the latest addition because Otago, they do like to recruit players from other regions for a variety of reasons. And I expect Luke Georgeson to get a lot more bowling opportunities with Otago, which will be interesting because he has opened in the Plunket Shield a few times as well. He's a really good batter, really good bowler, really good all-rounder. Moving to Otago is going to provide him with a lot more opportunities because his all-rounder spot was kind of being taken by Muhammad Abbas, who is an absolute monster for Wellington. 5 games of first-class cricket. He's got a batting average of 50. 9 innings, 1 century, 3 50s. And Muhammad Abbas is really good. He is based... What I expect from Muhammad Abbas this summer is him to play... I expect him to play every Super Smash game that he's available and build, because he's only played Plunket Shield. So how he does in the Ford Trophy will be really interesting, let alone Super Smash, because he basically made his Plunket Shield debut and whacked a bunch of sixes. He's also a left-arm seamer, which is a really good all-rounder package, and I think the departure of Luke Georgeson will help Muhammad Abbas, but for some reason I also think the departure of Finn Allen is going to help Muhammad Abbas because he can grow into a aggressive Wellington batter. And I think he is going to be an interesting bloke to watch out for in the Super Smash for Wellington this summer. So I'll dive deeper into it for tomorrow's email newsletter, and then I'll deliver a big yarn as well based on what I learn and what I realize after typing about it for the email newsletter. But those big moves, they open up opportunities, and they happen because there are youngsters on the rise. There is recruitment, bringing this player in, shuffling that player out, and there is still a lot of young talent in Aotearoa cricket that I think a lot of people are overlooking when they complain about the elderly Black Caps that still win a lot of cricket games.
And might win a World Cup in a few months, who knows? Yeah, fingers crossed. There's some funky moves there. It's a little bit more than usual as well. And I think the Georgeson move is really quite interesting because that feels like, in particular, one of those ones that just suits everyone because it does clear the pathway for Muhammad Abbas. It does sort of ease up a little bit of Wellington's kind of, they're just a lot of top order batters and also a lot of bowlers. And it wasn't necessary, like Georgeson just kind of felt like he was in the mix there. Whereas for Otago, he will get to bat in the top 6 and he will get to bowl regular overs and he'll probably get to be quite a key kind of almost a senior player for that team because it is a relatively young team. Like you said, there's a lot of very good young fellas coming through in Otago, and what you want to do is surround them with a few, guys who've been, even if it's only a few more seasons than them, have been around a little bit longer. And Georgeson, while he's very young, he's had that like experience in Ireland and stuff as well, which helps. And then alongside like Foxcroft and the Phillips brothers and dudes like this, like that's a funky little team. The thing that stuck out though is like, so Kyle Jamieson and Michael Ray have both gone to Canterbury. Have I got this right?
Yes.
So did Canterbury just feel like they didn't have enough good seamers, or could he get two more of the best of Plunkett Shield guys going around, or was, they
Well,
weren't
like
exactly sure, were they? Like,
if you're
or then
a
again, if you're a seamer though, that's kind of where you want to play, isn't it?
yeah, and like there is some yarn, and it's the same with Super Rugby about spreading the talent out and all this stuff. Like, no,
Mm.
you need to design a program that is attractive to other players. You need to lure those players in. You need to attract those players in. What does Canterbury do? They attract seamers because you're going to develop as a seam bowler. You're going to get better. And like the Canterbury seam attack, they like. Let's talk about the big Donnies, Auckland and Canterbury. The Canterbury seam bowling depth takes an absolute large number 2 all over Auckland. Like, it's not even
And has done
funny.
for several years too.
And like, so now you've got Henry Shipley, Fraser Sheet, Michael Ray, Ed Nuttall, Will O'Rourke, that's 5, Angus McKenzie, that's 6, and my favourite seamer, Zach Folks. He's another one you need to watch out for this summer, but we'll talk about him later. He's a really good cricketer himself, let alone Kyle Jamieson. So if we're like,
and Matt Henry.
And Matt Henry, but so it's like the Henry Shipley is our next up seamer. We've talked a lot about Henry Shipley for the Black Caps. He's the next up seamer. He's in Canterbury. Below him, Zach Folks and Will O'Rourke are the next seamers who have Black Caps talent. Like, they're not ready for the Black Caps right now, but Will O'Rourke and Zach Folks, they have pure Black Caps talent. So you could make a case that the next 3 to 4 seamers on the rise in Kiwi cricket, they're all in Canterbury. And like, fair play to Canterbury. That's what you do. You want the best players and you want the best system. Like, we know Kyle Jamieson, he's from Auckland. Will O'Rourke is also from Auckland. Michael Ray, he was playing for Otago. So the Canterbury cricket. Oh, and Sean Davey. Like, Sean Davey is a more quicker bowler. He's a bit of a speed demon, so there's lots of depth. I've finished my sentence. Canterbury do love talent from other regions, not quite as much as Otago, but they do love recruiting players from other areas. Just to finish my initial, or just to add to my initial point, Mohamed Abbas played for New Zealand A against Australia A. And Mohamed Abbas, his last 4 games of Plunkett Shield cricket, he 79, 33, 1, 130, 95, 8, 25, 82. That means he's got a 50-plus score in every Plunkett Shield game he has played. Boom. Mitch Hay, he also played for New Zealand A. And his the way he finished the summer, 89, 98, 7, 83, 11, 81, 44, 43. And like, let alone Thorne Parks. Thorne Parks was one of the best young batters in Plunkett Shield last summer. He's with Otago. Dean Foxcroft, one of the best batter across all formats. He's with Otago as well. So plenty of funk in there. And I'm going to be writing about that tomorrow for the email newsletter. I'll also be previewing the White Ferns T20 series, and the ODI series was a bummer. The White Ferns kind of sucked, and it is quite depressing. Quite depressing following the White Ferns ODI cricket team, but they are a better T20 team. Since the start of 2020, the White Ferns ODI record is 13 and 23. The T20 record is 20 and 16. So they do have a winning T20 record in the last 3 years. And at the T20 World Cup, they lost 2 games, Australia and South Africa, both by over 50 runs. Both games, well, this is not good to reflect upon. Against Australia, the Kiwis scored 76 all out. Against South Africa, 67 all out. So that is depressing. But then they defeated Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. They rolled Sri Lanka for 60. Granted, that was in South Africa, it wasn't in Sri Lanka, but heading into the White Ferns T20 series against Sri Lanka, they are a better T20 team. They have defeated Sri Lanka recently. Surely the White Ferns don't get smoked in this T20 series as well.
Surely. Depends if old mate Atapatu wants to play and hit another couple hundreds at, already batting at 2020 strike rates and ODIs. So we'll see what happens in the T20 stuff. But it felt like both the two games that they lost, it was kind of because of one player they couldn't get out. Like there's just one opening batter who just went nuts and they didn't have an answer to it. And therefore they lost because chasing down totals. But I don't know. I mean, it was. I watched a bit of that ODI series, and because you'd mentioned the spin factor going into it, so I kind of had that in the back of my head. Sri Lanka basically bowled all spinners except for like one or two seamers with the new ball, and maybe a little bit at the end. Like they're very spin heavy. White Ferns a little less spin heavy, but they were picking, like three spinners in every game, or using three spinners heavily as picking at least four because you could count Susie Bates, but I don't think she actually bowled much. I can't remember. I think she got smacked once in the first game, and didn't bowl again. And that was the extreme version, but it also didn't seem to be unique. It seemed like across the board, the Kiwi spinners weren't their worst bowlers. Like even Amelia Kerr wasn't taking wickets. Jonas and Carson weren't taking wickets, and were actually going for quite hectic strike rates and most of those games. Yeah, like the spin thing definitely felt like an area where the White Ferns were dominated, but maybe that's to be expected playing overseas, and maybe in a T20 thing because I don't know if they've ever even toured Sri Lanka before. I can't remember. I know the first game they lost to Sri Lanka, someone said it was the first time Sri Lanka had beaten the White Ferns in any context, which there aren't that many contexts. They don't play that often. There are no test matches, but still, it's like it is a unique thing, and they are a better T20 team. So I felt like after the first game where they lost quite handily, but then bounced back to win really nicely in the second on the back of hundreds to Kerr and Devine, it felt like, okay, well, they got the first one out of the way with, but then the third game was a repeat of the first one, which is weird because then you can't say, oh, well, they were just settling into the tour and now they're good to go. If your third game is the same as the first game, you can't say that anymore. But they are a better T20 team, as you say. So I guess that's the thing to hang the hat on, isn't it? Is that shorter formats as well, you can lean on your pace bowlers more often in the hot conditions, which are unique to, well, not unique to Sri Lanka, but new to these White Ferns players. Even the experienced ones probably haven't had too many opportunities to tour a place like Sri Lanka before, and the heat, the humidity, all that. Shorter spells in T20 stuff, it's something to lean on.
Like the seamers got tonked as well, except for Leah Tahuhu. So, like, I just don't think the White Ferns are that good. Like what you're talking about.
That's another aspect.
On the Patreon podcast, you were big into the idea that Australia is just better than England. So no matter how England play, Australia is probably going to win. They're just better. You can make a case Sri Lanka is just better, and it doesn't matter who's bowling, how they're bowling, the team combinations, team selection. I don't know if it really matters when all the White Ferns bowlers kind of got touched up by Atapatu, and fair play to her. Lee Kasparek didn't bowl at all in that series, and it was weird to see Molly Penfold selected for the third ODI when Lee Kasparek, the best spinner from New Zealand, isn't playing. Guess what? Molly Penfold, she got tonked, and she barely takes a wicket. And Fran Jonas has fallen off a cliff. Like, she's not performing at the same level as she did when she was like 17 years old. Like, now she's 19 years old, and she hasn't really kicked on. Amelia Kerr isn't as good a bowler as she is a batter right now. I thought Hannah Rowe was decent, but then she gets dropped for the third ODI. Molly Penfold comes in. It's all the same old White Ferns ideas, and that's the crux of my intrigue for this T20 series is, do these White Ferns ideas that have existed since at least 2018, White Ferns woes, do they continue for another week? It seems likely given what we saw in the ODI series and just how some ideas have just been doubled down upon, because like there's not many runs coming from the other batters, right? Like that's the same thing we've always known about the White Ferns is the amount of batting pressure on Susie Bates, Sophie Devine, Amelia Kerr, Maddie Green. When now Bernadine Bezuidenhout, she was opening, she did nothing. And let alone the whole confusion around the wicketkeeper situation, because this time last year, Izzy Gaze was the number one wicketkeeper. She got brushed aside for Jess McFadyen. It's like, okay, they're going to give Jess McFadyen a crack. She barely got a crack. Then they select Bernadine Bezuidenhout for the T20 World Cup. She's all right. She's aggressive. But she didn't score enough runs, and she hasn't scored enough runs here in Sri Lanka either. So it's like they're still looking for role-playing batters. And I'm pretty sure Brooke Halliday and Fran Jonas only get selected because they're lefties. So again, you're not selecting the best players. You're just selecting potential and a idea. You're selecting based on the idea of them being lefties. Brooke Halliday didn't score any runs. Fran Jonas isn't really developing. So it's all similar ideas for the White Ferns, and I hope they win some games in Sri Lanka, which they should. Like, they should be too powerful because when they were successful, it was their power. They won the second ODI. It was Sophie Devine smashing boundaries, Amelia Kerr smashing boundaries, then Leah Tahuhu taking 4 wickets with power. Powerful bowling. Unfortunately,
biggest hitter and fastest bowler, basically.
Yeah, but then Sri Lanka had a bigger hitter.
Yes.
So I don't know what's doing there, but we'll wait and see for the T20 series. Nothing really suggests that they will improve. I think they should be defeating Sri Lanka in any country, any conditions. And I'm curious to see what happens in the T20 series, because they had a disappointing, like the ODI series in Sri Lanka, that is aligned with disappointing ODI mahi. Going back to 2018, but primarily zoned around the ODI World Cup in New Zealand. T20 team, well, they just had a disappointing T20 World Cup. So what is that? How does that flow into this series against Sri Lanka? And considering the White Ferns won a Commonwealth Games bronze medal, which is T20 cricket, featuring most of the best nations in the world, there is a case to be made that they have gone backwards in T20 cricket if they struggle in the T20 series against Sri Lanka. So we'll keep an eye on that one. We are also keeping an eye on Flying Kiwis transfers. You've been looking at the Flying Kiwis transfers. What's kind of the biggest moves that are being made right now with regards to Kiwi footballers around the world?
Yeah, I had to wait like 2 or 3 weeks after the season's ended for to get to the point where contracts actually have expired and movement started happening and teams are preparing for preseason. So now they're trying to bring in their new players and all this. Like there was definitely a pause and just that impatient wait kind of thing for things to happen. And then last 10 days, it's gone a little bit bonkers. You've had Callum McCallum moving to Silkeborg from leaving Helsingør with 1 year left on his contract. So I assume that was for a fee. That's a jump up to the top flight in Denmark from the second tier. You've had Max Crocombe on his free transfer after leaving Grimsby Town. He's gone to Burton Albion. So that is one step up. It's gone from League 2 to League 1. So also jumping up a division. This morning, big one with Sarpreet Singh, which is probably the most notable of these ones, I think, and the most sort of curious because he hasn't jumped up a division. he's jumped down a division technically. If you say he's gone from Bayern Munich to sign with Hansa Rostock, which again was probably for a fee because he had another year left with Bayern. It's possible Bayern just released him from his contract, but I'll get into some of the weeds of that when we finish this and I do a little more Google translated readings. We'll see how that goes, but technically, he wasn't really a Bayern Munich player. He was under contract at Bayern Munich, but he hadn't been around that first team for a couple of years. So really, had spent a couple of years in the second tier, and now he's staying with a second tier club. So it's more, in effect, it's more of a lateral move. But I guess because he had had that move to Werder Bremen, who are a Bundesliga club, a year ago, which was on the cards. It was signed. It was ready to go, and he failed the medical because of his ongoing the pelvic injury. I can't remember what it's called, right, or how to describe it, but it's like the pelvic inflammation thing that he was dealing with that wrecked a lot of about 8 or 9 months of last year, and then he went on loan instead to Regensburg, where he'd been the year before, where up until he got injured, he was lightning. He was unreal. He was one of the leading assist makers in the second tier of Bundesliga. This is where he had sort of earned that Werder Bremen move. I would imagine also Winton Rufer might have had a little bit to say about the Werder Bremen move. He's still got a lot of influence there. And I noticed, I did see someone's reporting that it's Marko Lorenz, who is ex-Wellington Phoenix Academy, has been trialing with Werder Bremen's under-23s team or something like that. So there's still a Winton Rufer link helping players get set there. I remember him setting up, I think it was Trevor Vetzlut a while back until he busted his knee and that didn't work out for him, but he's now actually playing in the USL Championship in America, starting to get some games again and back on track, hopefully. So, yeah, with Sarpreet Singh, it was like you knew he was moving. You knew he wasn't going to go back to Bayern at this stage. Like that was clear. It was just about whether he could get a Bundesliga move or not, and I guess he couldn't. Like he didn't, because he didn't have a very good season last year. He was out injured for the first third of it, and then they wrecked his registration. So he still, even when he came back from injury, he couldn't. He was cleared, but he couldn't play until after the winter break when the games resumed and they could have another transfer window to register him properly. And then when he came back, I think he had like a goal and 2 assists in his first 3 games. And it was like, yeah, mate, picking up right where he left off, and then none for the rest of the season. No more goals, no more assists. I watched a decent chunk of those Regensburg games, and there were games where he was good and unlucky, like hitting the crossbar, or there was one where he was through on goal and the guy slide tackled him and got red carded. And it's like, well, yeah, okay, the team does all right there. The other team gets sent off, but Sarpreet Singh's moment disappears. He was through on goal, about to score, and then foul. Little things like that, where it's like he's and good saves against him and things like this, like where he's clearly unlucky. Like the season before, those were probably flying it, and combine that with the lack of availability for the first half and the injury recovery probably being a factor as well, and getting his fitness back up. Like he just had a dud season. So I guess maybe the market wasn't there for him in the same way. But with Hansa Rostock, he is in a league where he knows he can dominate. Like he doesn't have to step up at a point where his confidence might not be where it was, or it's just his match rhythm might not be where it was. And then he's still got to prove himself at a higher level in the Bundesliga, working in where there's going to be more competition. Like with Hansa Rostock, he should be a first 11 player for them. I would imagine they bought him to be a first 11 player. He signed a 3-year contract, so he doesn't have to worry about, like he's had for the last 3 years in a row, this is your contract season. You're trying to earn that move. Oh, no, well, you got injured. Okay, well, first loan wasn't very good. Okay, well, we'll give you another year at Bayern and then loan you out again. Okay, this thing is like 3 years in a row he's had this sort of uncertainty. He's now lost that uncertainty. He's shed that. He's at a league where he knows he can dominate, and it's just about getting those reps now and bringing the magic back, as we've seen from him in the past, which we know he's capable. He knows he's capable of. Hansa Rostock know that he's capable of it. Probably some of them Bundesliga clubs would know he's capable of it as well. And just because he's signed a 3-year contract doesn't mean that someone won't come swooping in before that time with a transfer fee, because it almost happened before. Last time he had 7 or 8 really good months in this league, a Bundesliga club tried to sign him. So And we don't know what the case might be with his contract. People often have like release clauses and things like that. So it's it's not the golden move we would have liked, but it's probably the safe, but also like the safe move isn't doesn't mean it's the wrong move. It probably means it's kind of the right move to just to get himself back on track again. Um, in a way where there's fewer variables and unknowns, which he hasn't had that for a while. He hasn't had that stability since he moved to Europe in his career, and he's finally got that. So hopefully that's the thing. Um, on top of that, you've also just quickly as well contract extensions for CJ Bott at Leicester City, for Ali Riley at Angel City, like a few of the key football Ferns players too. And frankly, I think there will probably be plenty more where this came from. And Marko Stamenic as well, like this transfer was announced a while ago, but we'll mention like he's played 3 games of preseason for Red Star Belgrade. He started all of them and he's played progressively more each time. I think he played the first half of the first game, then he played the first 60 minutes, and he played the first 78 minutes of their latest game. Currently in Russia, it would be a weird place to be right now, but he's in Russia playing some preseason games, the tournament hosted by Zenit St. Petersburg. Things looking pretty like he's more embedded in that team from the start than I thought he would be. I thought there would be a period where he has to sort of earn his spot, but it seems like they're targeting him just to be a first team player. And it's not just like it's not the contained central defensive midfielder role he mostly did for Copenhagen either, which was partly by like get in where you fit in because they had a central defensive midfielder who got injured before the season, so he comes in to play that role. With Red Star, they're playing him as an 8, so they've got a like 3-man midfield, and one guy sits back defensively, sweeps around, drops into the defensive line, picks up the ball, passes it out, sort of thing. He's the hard tackler, and they got 2 8s in front of him who are a little bit more free roaming. Stamenic has been one of those. And that's really like one thing I've noticed from what I've seen from these games so far, and they have been live streamed on YouTube, which is quite handy. Like I've actually been able to like watch not just the highlight clips, but extended bits of how he plays within the game. And he's like the thing that stands out is how often he's getting into the penalty area. Like he's making these late runs, he's making these early runs into the box. He's really, really attacking crosses and getting like providing that extra number in the box. I think there's going to be goals for this dude. We just saw him score a goal against Qatar that was pretty handy for the All Whites. I think there's going to be goals for this dude playing in Serbia, particularly because Red Star, they were 22 points ahead of the second place team last year. They win a lot of games. He's going to get opportunities. That's quite an exciting thing because we are really going to see Marko Stamenic unleashed rather than like not just him at a high level and doing what he has to do to fit in. It looks like at this team, they're actually going to unleash him to do a bit of everything, which is exciting because I think he's capable of that,
So before that, where Marko Stamenic was more a CDM, and he was that for the All Whites as well. Like he was the holding defensive midfielder.
He has been, yeah. But in the most
Bell.
recent series, Joe Bell was playing the deeper role, which allowed Stamenic to do a bit more of what we're seeing from him here. So yeah, but because as well, like because it was the first game against China, he definitely did that because Joe Bell wasn't ready to play. But I think when they both play, Bell will be the deeper one and Stamenic a bit more free. But yeah, he's done both and he can do both. He even played a game at centre back for Copenhagen during their sort of title quest as well, which was pretty important. He is a versatile player.
So he's played centre back, centre defensive midfielder, and a more attacking midfielder, which is clear indicators of a really good footballer. You have a note here that a bunch of football Ferns have re-signed to their England teams, the England Women's Super League. Rhea Percival's with Tottenham, Rebecca Stott is with Brighton, and Elite is with Aston Villa. CJ Bott is with Leicester City. Those are all Football Ferns World Cup squad members. So that will be interesting to see how they play in the World Cup, obviously, and then moving back to the England Super League. We do have the Women's World Cup kind of in the warm-up stages. What's top of mind for you at this moment with regards to the Football Ferns, the World Cup? We'll touch on this like frequently ahead of the World Cup. Is there just some sort of idea that you've been pondering recently as we get into the Women's World Cup?
Well, a lot of the like up to this point, the Ferns have been in camp for like 9, 10 weeks. And it wasn't everyone there all at once because people had club duties to take care of. The A League players were there to start, except the ones who made the finals came in a week later. And then, as the European seasons finish, players start trickling in. And there's a few, like I think, Jackie Hand played the week before last. Ellie Riley played last Thursday. So there's a few, like it's been a steady procession. I think Ellie Riley and Betsy Hassett were the only two that weren't there for the squad unveiling. And I know Ellie Riley's there now, and I think Hassett probably will be as well. So um, it's been like a steady influx and a very steady build up, and they've had this unprecedented like more than 2 months of preparation, training camp stuff. You normally get like 2 days of training camp stuff before you have to crack into an international window friendly, and then you're on recovery next day, maybe get another day of training, and then you've got another game. And if you're lucky, you might get a week, but you might not have all your players. And it's the opportunity to have what they've just had is probably never happened before, for a football Ferns squad, particularly with professional players involved. But that was a lot of it. Was the focus was on like who can win spots in the squad and what's the squad going to look like, and we've got that now. Obviously, they're all working on tactics and stuff. Probably knew what the squad was going to be a lot earlier than we did, but the focus now, I think, very definitely needs to shift towards right. We know these 21 players. We know what's coming up. It's the best opportunity they'll ever have to do well at a World Cup. Never won a game at a World Cup. Talking about getting out of the group stage, I just want to see them win a game first. If they win a game, then we think about the group stage, but they're not going to get out of the group stage without winning a game, and they've never won a game before. So can they win that first ever game at a World Cup? There's one friendly game before the World Cup starts that is going to be public, like caps awarded kind of thing on I assume on television. So Napier against Vietnam on Monday evening. So that's the last opportunity we'll get to see them in that context before they play Norway. I think it's 2 weeks today, actually, the first game. I think it's the 20th. So last opportunity to show, last opportunity, but also first opportunity, really, to show the public at least what they've been working on to this point. I will say Vietnam, I think, actually lost to the Philippines recently, who were one of the teams in the Philippines beat Vietnam 2-1 2 months ago. So Philippines being the lowest ranked team in the Football Ferns squad. I was also looking at how Switzerland and Norway have been going, and I think Norway have only won one of their last where are we here? Norway had only won one of their last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games. One win in their last 7 games, although they have been playing teams like, Sweden, Spain, France, Denmark. They beat Uruguay, drew with England, actually, lost again to France. Like they've been playing some very good teams. So I don't think we should underestimate Norway because of that. Switzerland are in a similar spot, though. I was looking at the Switzerland team, and I noticed it because they had a 0-0 draw with Morocco this morning in one of their friendly games. I think their last public friendly game before all these teams might be having training ground games behind closed doors or whatever, which won't count. But, we don't see that, so we can't talk on that. Switzerland also 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games since they last won. They've had a lot of draws in there. Don't seem to score too many goals other than a 3-3 draw against Zambia, which I don't know if that's encouraging the Football Ferns or not. But, we know the Football Ferns haven't been winning games. We know that's one thing they've been working towards. They've had this great camp. They've picked their squad, all that sort of. But we also know their form hasn't been fantastic. Well, frankly, like Switzerland and Norway's form hasn't been fantastic coming into it either. It doesn't always matter leading into a World Cup. It's what you do at the tournament itself. And yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I think if you just delivered like some sort of hot take where you're like Norway and Sweden are equally as shit as the Football Ferns, that would have been like you kind of like waffled your way around it. But it is quite.
I could have done it, but it might not be accurate.
Yeah, but that's where you got to just let it be. You just got to like go all in on something crazy. because there has been like a lot of negativity around the football Ferns, and when you look at those
Yeah,
other teams' records, they're the same as the football Ferns, and it's yeah, you can get into the details, but when you present it as generally as possible, it is quite interesting. And but that's different for the Philippines, right? The Philippines have
yeah.
had
Philippines have won 3 of their last 4, although those have, I think, all been against other Asian teams. They beat Vietnam, they beat Malaysia, they lost to Myanmar, they beat Hong Kong. They did lose before that. They lost. They went to the Pinatar Cup um, in February. They lost 1-0 to Wales. They lost 2-1 to Scotland. They lost 5-0 to Iceland. Don't think Wales are at the World Cup. I can't remember if Scotland made it, but I don't think they did. Iceland, I also don't think are at the World Cup, and Iceland, if they are, it doesn't matter. But also, Iceland, it matters to them. But Iceland played against the Football Ferns recently in the last tour. The Football Ferns drew 1-1. You know, it was one of their better results. They drew against a team that Philippines lost 5-0 to, and only a couple months apart those two tours. So yeah, the
and
Philippines have a nice record, but they've also maybe been playing weaker teams, whereas
yeah,
Norway have a bad record, but have been playing
yeah.
better teams. You know how it goes.
No caveats here. The rest of the teams suck. Football Ferns are the
And the
best.
Football Ferns are going to beat them all.
Um, what was the Philippines versus Vietnam result recently?
2-1 to Philippines.
So we might learn a bit
So
from the
that's
Football
a
Ferns.
relative, like 1-1 at halftime, you know,
Yeah,
hmm.
well,
Two
my point.
closely matched teams, and they should be similar styles as well.
Yeah, so we'll learn a lot about the upcoming pool play from this game against Vietnam on Monday night. It's be quite interesting. Warm-up game for the Football Ferns. Let's wiggle into the Warriors versus Eels in the NRL on Saturday night. Eels, Eels are missing some state of origin players, and I kind of reckon it would have been great if the Rabbitohs were missing some state of origin players last week. Cody Walker, Cam Murray, Kaloa Matangi. Like, if all those dudes weren't playing at Mount Smart, it would have been great. But they were playing. And now they come up against the Eels in Australia, and the Eels don't have Gutherson, Moses, or Regan Campbell-Gillard, which means Dejan Arce from Christchurch, he's still in the halves. He's going to be starting halfback. But it is a weakened Eels team. Meanwhile, for the Warriors, Sean Johnson may or may not play, and I wrote about this morning. The ideal situation is Luke Metcalf and Ronald Volkman, just from a how cool would that be perspective. They're both young halves. I think Volkman is a pure number 7, and I think that would be a lot better than the possibility of Luke Metcalf playing number 7 and Dylan Walker in the halves. So those are the two options. The younger option is far more interesting, just knowing that you've got those two halves in your squad and they're both capable NRL players. The rest of the team is pretty solid. Big part of my preview yarn was the lack of running meters from Shans Nickel-Crookstar, Dallin Watene-Zalesniak, and Marcelo Montoya against the Rabbitohs. And I've got that. So in the variety show, I mentioned the kicking splits that the Rabbitohs had, like Cody Walker and Lachlan Ilias. They had an even split of kicking duties, which is very useful in a game of rugby league. Funnily enough, like the Eels and the Warriors are slightly different because Moses does all the kicking for the Eels, right? Sean Johnson does all the kicking for the Warriors. So there are different ways to do it, but having the two kickers is so useful. And what the Rabbitohs did is a lot of their kicks. So Cody Walker did most of his kicks down the Warriors' end, very creative kicks, short kicks. And that's quite similar to what Ronald Volkman does. Ronald Volkman's short kicking game is quite funky. He's got the little chips about knee height that dribble into the in-goal area. Good high kicker. He's just got a very creative kicking game. But the Rabbitohs, a lot of their long kicks were directed closer to the sideline. Whereas Sean Johnson, his long kicks, they were basically in the middle third of the field. So when we're thinking Rabbitohs, wet weather footy, and a back three for the Warriors who had some of their lowest running meters in a game this season, kicking towards the sideline, pinning them close to the sideline, first that restricts your running meters because you can't go either way. Then the next play is coming off the sideline. So you can limit the meters on that carry as well, just by condensing your defensive line. A lot of Sean Johnson's kicks were in the middle third, so then the person catching the ball can go either way. Ideally, they get to the middle of the field so that the next play can go either way, and you can't get the defensive numbers on the runner. And that's what the Rabbitohs did a great job of against the Warriors. That's why the back three had some of their lowest running meters this season. And that's just an interesting footy thing. That is something to watch out for as we get into finals footy. Because it's one thing, Moses and Johnson do this a lot. It's one thing just to land a kick on the 10-meter line. And sure, you can go set for set, land the kick on the 10-meter line, hammer them, grind it out. But if those kicks are in the middle of the field, it's very different to those kicks being out near the sideline. And it just changes the whole makeup of the attacking set coming off your own, coming out of your own territory. Not sure how much of that applies this week against the Rabbitohs, because the Rabbitohs halves are Ryan Madison and Dejan Arce. Dejan Arce is going to do all the kicking. Sean Russell's at fullback. He's not going to kick. You might get some kicks from Brendan Hands out of dummy half, but it's going to be Dejan Arce doing all the kicks. So I don't think the Eels can do what the Rabbitohs did to the Warriors. So that means folks should expect 150 plus meters from Nickel Clockstar, Watene Zalesniak, and Marcelo Montoya, which then starts the whole set of six going. Suddenly Adam Whenua-Blake's taken the fourth or fifth hit up in a set of six around the 40-meter line. Boom, that's Warriors footy. None of that was possible against the Rabbitohs because of their kicking game, because of their game plan. I think it's going to be very easy to do against the Eels.
Nice. And the Eels have been in some pretty raging form recently as well, haven't they? Part of that has been since Dejan Arce's come into the team as well, is they've gone a little bit wild on some of their results lately. Yeah,
they're a good team. Like the Eels are a good team.
Like, I don't know, they are a good team because they started slowly and then they've gone. I'm trying to find the thing where they back in the wrong one. Here we go. They beat put 48 on the Dolphins last week. They put 34 on the Seagulls the week before, 34 on the Bulldogs the week before that, and then had wins 24-6. Then you get after this prior to their bye against South Sydney and North Queensland. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wins in a row for Parramatta Eels. However, as you mentioned, they are down their origin players, so that I guess is it's always a significant factor, isn't it? But it is a team in form, and it is a Parramatta home game. And the Warriors are coming off they were on their own win streak, weren't they? They won 3 or 4 in a row prior to the Rabbitohs defeat. So it is it's not the ideal situation for a bounce back game because they are against a pretty informed team. But maybe that's a little bit sneakily hidden by the thing, in which case it could be both a bounce back and a statement win for the Warriors. But
I actually think the Eels are first for offloads, and I think they are second or third for post-contact meters, and that is Eels rugby league.
Right.
I think how do
That's
the Eels
pretty
play?
good.
Yeah, how do the Eels play their footy? Power and offloads. Eels are also second for errors and 17th for completion rate. So I think that as long as there's dry conditions, because as we know, wet weather footy is the Warriors' kryptonite, so the Warriors will automatically lose if rain is in the air in Parramatta. If it's dry conditions, the Eels are going to make errors, and they've got the worst completion rate in the NRL by the looks of it. So the Eels will give the Warriors opportunities. Now that, as long as you're first in offloads and second or third for post-contact meters, you can, like, the Bulldogs suck, The Dolphins were missing players. What was the other result there? Seagulls. Seagulls are
Seagulls,
inconsistent.
yeah.
Seagulls are great one week, shit the next week. We know the Bulldogs just royally suck. Talked a lot about them in the Patreon podcast, and I love how much they suck, except for Hayes Perham, who leads the Bulldogs in tackle busts. I will never boo Hayes Perham, but whatever, Bulldogs are psychos. They love to boo everyone, and the Bulldogs suck. How about that? The Eels, their style of footy is good, I think, at defeating weaker teams because they can blow them away. Like, you're just charging down the field. You've got offloads. You've got a good kicking game from Moses. Of course, no Dylan Brown. He's got his issues. He's out suspended. So that is a bonus for the Warriors. Josh Curran is also out suspended, I think, but he's less of a loss than Dylan Brown. Dylan Brown, formerly the best number 6 in the NRL. I don't know if the Eels' statistical style is a good matchup for the Warriors, because the Warriors are going to grind you down. They're going to go set for set. They're going to try and not make as many errors. They're going to complete their sets. And what they didn't do against the Rabbitohs was build pressure down the Rabbitohs' end. I think Mitchell Barnett had a knock-on down that end of the field. There were a couple penalties given away down that end of the field. That's where the game was won or lost for the Warriors. And I think if the Eels give the Warriors that much possession, that much territory, that's where you're going to see the Warriors settle into their groove. And I think another stat, the Warriors were top 5 for decoy runs. So when you think about attacking shape and how the Warriors move the ball, there's a lot of decoy runners, which just makes common sense. They are 3rd for decoy runners. And that's why I think having Dylan Walker stay in the forward pack will be crucial. Like, the Warriors, as we said, Adam Fanua-Blake, he's got a bit of a nifty passing game. He's got a skillful passing game. Tohu Harris has the more distribution flow passing game. They can still move the footy around without Dylan Walker in the forward pack. But when Dylan Walker's in the forward pack and he's got speed and he's got his own ball playing subtleties, I think that is going to be a great recipe against the Eels forward pack that is still big. It's still powerful. Junior Paulo's still there. Sean Lane's coming off the bench. Offa Ngaui's coming off the bench. Makatoa from New Plymouth, he's on the bench. Ofaki Ogden from Mangere East, he's starting prop. No Wiremu Greg, but Jermaine Hopgood's starting lock. He's in the Queensland wider squad, I think. So it's still a good Eels forward pack, who are one of the best PCM teams in the NRL. But if the Warriors can do their shape, if the Warriors can execute their style of footy, I think they can move those forwards around. And that's where you're going to see maybe tries on the edges and tries through the middle, because they're going to attack the spaces. And I still think the Warriors need Dylan Walker in the forward pack to really make the most of that. That's why I don't want to see him go in the halves.
Well, they did try that earlier in the season after Tomato Martin first got injured, didn't they? Where Walker played a few games in the halves. And I think Metcalf was out injured at that point, and they sort of they tried it with Walker for a couple of weeks, and it wasn't really working. And because it's a drop off from Martin, obviously, but it's also a drop off for the forward pack. So you're sort of weakening 2 spots at the same time, and then as well as not just forward pack, but particularly the bench rotation as well, because of that role Walker was playing coming in after 20 odd minutes and adding that bit of pizzazz to things. They tried it, and then they moved to Volkman, and then Metcalf came back, and he's been in their last few weeks. So I suspect they wouldn't do that again. Like, it sort of seems like
it's a different.
The reasons why I tried it and went away from it are probably the reasons why they wouldn't chuck Walker there again. But it is a different thing because it's Johnson missing this time, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is, potentially. I mean, Johnson might just play. The kid might get born early, and then there you go. Marvel's of modern medicine, but
the Walker being
I don't know. My impression is that they probably wouldn't do it again.
We got some almighty lag here, so it's just a bit tricky. But when Walker was in the halves, he's not kicking. So again, it's that kicking split. And Metcalf is not the busiest kicker, but as soon as Walker goes in the halves, then he's not. He's a passer. But he's not. He's a fast forward, but he's not as fast as Luke Metcalf. He's not as good running the footy as Tamairo Martin. He's not as nimble and dynamic as Ronald Volkman, and he's not going to kick as well as those guys. Like you can basically, you could put Ryan Madison at number 6 and keep Dylan Walker in the halves if Ryan Madison was playing for the Warriors, and have the same attacking shape. Like you don't necessarily need to have Dylan Walker playing number 6 for him to be in those positions when the Warriors are attacking. And I think specifically against the Eels, you want as much speed and passing in the forward pack as possible, because that Eels forward pack is really big. And with the Warriors bench, they've still got Freddie Lussick on the bench, so I don't think you're going to see too many changes to the Warriors bench unless there is that shuffle in the halves. But we saw it last week, wet weather footy, Freddie Lussick didn't even play, and a small bench was monstered by the Rabbitohs. The bench is small again, like the Eels bench is Luca Moretti, Offengawe, Sean Lane, Makatoa. Those are pretty big dudes, and the Warriors don't have a big dude on their bench. So that tells me, hopefully it's not raining. Because then the Warriors can get into their groove, shifting the footy, playing a bit faster. And it's a really important game for the Warriors because they need as many wins as possible, and they should have won last week. Like, that was a home game, local conditions, coming off wins, feeling good. Should have won that game. Didn't win it, okay, but now you need to defeat the Eels to make sure you're a certified top 8 team. And if you can't defeat the Eels without Moses and Gutherson specifically, I don't think you deserve to be like a top 6 team. Like, if you lose to the Eels in this situation, then you probably deserve to be a 7 through 10 team, which is the Warriors' zone of mediocrity. Like, they're consistently good at that zone. But if you can defeat the Eels in this game, then you are more of a top 6 type of team. And I think that's what Warriors fans will be hoping for against the Eels. Your Dragons, there's been a change there. Unfortunately, as I said, the Bulldogs suck, and they've made Hayes Perham the scapegoat, despite the Bulldogs having far bigger issues than Hayes Perham. So shout out to Hayes Perham. Aotearoa is with you. The week that Hayes Perham drops out of the NRL, Paul Turner comes in at fullback for the Dragons. And I think this is his first game of the season. He had been playing number 6 a bit for the Dragons, but he was playing at fullback for a while because Talatau Amone came back into the team. And Tyrell Sloan is out. So, like, I was a bit down on Paul Turner at the Dragons because I couldn't see how he got game time. Like, you've got Tyrell Sloan, Amone, and Sullivan in your spine. So Paul Turner's like a secondary player in those positions. No Sloan means Paul Turner comes in at fullback, which will be interesting to see. He had some nice highlights playing fullback for Tweed Heads last season in Queensland. I did have a highlight clip of him playing, I think he might have been playing number 6 for the Dragons earlier this season. I did see him play fullback against the Warriors in New South Wales Cup at Mount Smart a few weeks ago. The Dragons won that game. So it'll be interesting to see what Paul Turner does. Of course, he's from Whangarei, but you're coming up against the Canberra Raiders, and I like the Canberra Raiders. As I said on the Variety Show, Ata Mariota's starting at lock. He's, as I said on the Variety Show, he's from Manurewa, and he's now a starting NRL player. Tapane Tomoko, Sebastian Chris. I've got to add Sebastian Chris to my list of Aotearoa Kiwis outside backs, which I had on the Variety Show. Joey Manu, Nickel Krokstad, Rapana, Isako, Muratalo, Watane Zalesniak, Tomoko, Chris. Chris has to be there because he can play centre as well as fullback. So I'm not sure where you want to pick up there, but Paul Turner, he's playing fullback for your Dragons. How about it?
Yeah, I'm excited for the Paul Turner era to begin. It's been
Era.
I don't know, all the golden. I'm calling it era.
It might be
Hopefully
1 week.
ERA and not ERROR.
Yeah, it might just be
Well,
one
it's a
week.
1 week era then, if that's the case. Um, it's yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I'll put it this way: like Terrell Sloan has had the he's been backed at fullback for several months, and the team's not been very good. And he's had flashes of some lovely, like skillful stuff. He's a very good runner and broken play. He's not a very good runner, sort of like returning kicks and hitting up the line and stuff like that. He's just a bit too small to do that stuff, and he doesn't quite have the ball playing to work around that. And he's solid, but I certainly don't think he's like locked in. And I think he's out with a doesn't sound like a very serious injury. I think it sounded like it's maybe just a 1 week thing, but Paul Turner puts up a good showing. Like the Dragons are desperate right now. They've been losing games for many weeks. They're the only reason they're not last is because the Tigers' points difference is so horrendous. Even more horrendous than the Dragons' own, because I think a lot of the Dragons' losses in the first part of the season were quite close losses. They were losing, but they weren't getting blown out. Had 50 put on them by close rivals Sharks last week, which is not ideal. And somehow that was only the third worst defeat of the round because the Bulldogs and Tigers both excelled in that area of getting thrashed. So I think, and because Paul Turner is a versatile player as well, I don't I don't think it's out of the question if he puts up a nice showing that he might be able to, get further games, even if it's not at fullback, as like a bench utility, or even if someone else gets injured coming in the halves, or there's a little bit of an opportunity there because when you're a bad team, any kind of bright spark is going to be latched upon by the fans immediately. Any little thing where it's like, hey, this dude getting a chance, he was actually quite promising. We want to see more of him. That's the kind of stuff that gets really lent into when you're in the position that the Dragons are in. So there's a relatively significant opportunity for him here, including potentially auditioning for other teams as well. There's that factor too to consider. It's it's a it's an opportunity that didn't necessarily look like it was going to come around, but it's interesting that it has, and it's interesting that it's happened at fullback. And I do think that's a position where the Dragons have been very much searching for answers for multiple years as well. So that's another factor to consider, is that it's not something that the club hierarchy don't already have in their mind of what do we do at fullback moving forward. So anyone who gets an opportunity there is going to have a chance to show something.
I think Tyrell Sloan's the fullback. Like, I don't know if there's a revolving door there. Like, he's your fullback. I think for the sake of Paul Turner, specifically Paul Turner, Ben Hunt's got to go. Like, that's what you're waiting for.
Well, that might happen.
You're just waiting for Ben Hunt to go, so at least there's an opportunity, because his opportunity is mostly about Sloan, but with no Ben Hunt, then you can play Amone and Sullivan and get into that spine. And if you've got that spine, but I don't think Paul Turner's a bench utility, because it's Moses Mbai, and you got to be able to play middle to take that bench utility slot. So I don't know what's going to happen with Paul Turner. I don't know what's going to happen with Hayes Perham either. But two interesting players, obviously former Warriors as well, to watch out for moving forward. Also, shout out to the Dolphins. The Dolphins have basically a full Kiwi NRL crew back on deck, waiting to see if Marshall King's fully healthy, but you got Tafare at centre, Isaka on the wing, the Bromwich brothers are there, Herman SAS from Mangere East is there, Connolly and Lemuelu from Otara is there. And keep this in mind, whenever you're watching the Dolphins, Valence Tafare and Connolly Lemuelu, they're both from Otara, they both went to Tangaroa College. So you got two players from Tangaroa College and Otara in the same NRL team, which is pretty epic. And they're playing the Titans this week. Keanu Kinney's on the extended bench. Don't think he's going to get a game time, but he is on the extended bench. So we'll see what happens there. Let's finish with a bit of NBL. NBL basketball. Points table: Tuatara 13 wins, Otago 11 wins, Franklin 11 wins, Canterbury Rams 9 wins, Wellington Saints 7 wins. Then you've got Nelson and Hawke's Bay both on 6 wins. They are 6th and 7th. Then the other 3 teams have 5 wins. So you've got 5 teams, maybe 6 including the Wellington Saints, still competing for the last 2 playoff spots. What tickles your fancy from this week's games, given that kind of ladder context?
Well, the latter context is nuts because I mean we had it last week where the bottom 5 teams were all on 5 wins. A couple of them have won since, a couple of them lost, and you also have at this stage there's because some teams will get the double game weeks. You've also got a couple of them still left, like Nelson have 3 games left on 6 wins. Manawatu have 3 games left on 5 wins. There's a banger of a game. I think it's Saturday night. Wellington hosting Manawatu. Wellington are sitting 5th. They're 2 points ahead of Nelson and Hawke's Bay. They're 4 points behind Canterbury, but they've only got 2 games left. You've got this game against the Manawatu Jets. The Manawatu Jets have 3 games left, so they could, if they beat the Saints, they can finish on the same points tally as the Saints, potentially, if they win out and the Saints also lose next week. Well, next week, the Saints are playing the Tuatara. And that's not the team you want to win when you need to get games to work your spot into the playoffs. So I think the Saints are definitely in that mix of still competing with the teams below them rather than competing with the teams above them. The Saints pretty much, I think, if they beat Manawatu this weekend, then they're sorted. They'll be in the top 6. But if they don't, I think they're in big trouble of dropping out of the 6 entirely, not just about whether they finish 5th or 6th, but I think they might end up in 7th or 8th at that point. And they could lose to the Jets very easily too, because the Jets have 3 very good imports who, when they win, those guys are all scoring 20 plus. And what do we know about the Saints? They can score points with anyone, but they can't defend. They've been allowing points all season, and that's a dangerous matchup for them against Manawatu. I also think there's
to your point, the Wellington Saints have the worst points against record in the NBL. So they're 5th, and they've got a worse points different, or they've conceded more points than the teams below them. They've conceded more points than the last place team.
Not ideal. Like that's not ideal, particularly when you come into playoff basketball, is it? It's where defense becomes even more of a factor. So I don't really see them going much beyond the first round of the playoffs. But it would be crazy stuff for the Wellington Saints, who have been such a powerhouse of this competition for so long, to miss the playoffs entirely. And I genuinely think that's something that might happen. The other battle is between the Otago Nuggets and Franklin Bulls, who are both on 11 wins, 2nd and 3rd. Their points difference, there's only 6 points. Like Nuggets are plus 57, Bulls are plus 51. I think it's head-to-head is the tiebreaker if it's only 2 teams. It is. So I'd have to check how those guys went against each other. But the Nuggets are playing away to the Giants this week and home to the Airs next week. The Bulls are home to the Airs this week and are away to Canterbury next week. So tricky times there, because that's a big difference between finishing 2nd and 3rd. You're making the playoffs either way. It's not the same as Hawke's Bay sitting in 7th right now trying to extend their season. Nuggets and Bulls will go that far, but finish 2nd, you get the first round bye. You finish 3rd, you have to play against the 6th place team, and the 6th place team is going to be whoever wins the most games over the last few rounds of these 6 other teams that are all contending for those last 2 spots in the playoffs. So whoever gets in 5th and 6th, they're going to have been winning a few games recently. They're going to be in nice touch, and we know a lot of the mid-season sort of player movement stuff as well has strengthened some of these teams with bit like mid-season pickups that they're better than. Like Nelson, for example, I think are a better team than where they currently sit on the table. like that's a big difference whether you can finish second or third. So I think that's something that's also to be kept a close eye on over the course of things. And of course, the Auckland Tuatara with 10 wins in a row, which is kind of running away with first spot. I think they need either Otago or Franklin to lose one more game each, or they just need to win one of their last two games. They'll probably win both of their last two games. Frankly, the Tuatara might not lose another game all season because once they get to the playoffs, I mean, if they're going to win the championship, you got to win your semi, you got to win your final. They win their next two games. I still think they are clearly the championship favorites right now. They might just finish on a 14 game win streak, you know?
Hawke's Bay Hawks, I imagine their home stadium is in Napier, and they have a home record of 1-6.
I assume so, yeah.
They have won one game. They have lost 6 games in Napier or in their home ground. Now, what do we know about Napier recently? Sporting stuff. Warriors and Broncos played there. Warriors lost, but mad pitch invaders. Mad pitch invaders. We've got a football Ferns game in Napier coming up. We've already had the warning. I think it might have been the Patreon podcast did have a warning about the pitch invaders for the football Ferns games. We've also got a Hawke's Bay Hawks team that in their home stadium are 1-6. So I don't know what it is for the Hawke's Bay region. Obviously tough times in the Hawke's Bay this year, but yeah, I just don't know what's doing. Like, people want to invade the pitch and they want to lose basketball games, you know?
Well, I haven't seen it happen on the basketball court yet, any intruders. Maybe if anyone intrudes on the basketball, they might just make the team, you know, if you start running on the court. You might, if you run on the court and hit a 3-pointer, you might get in the rotation.
But you also may run into Hiram Harris.
Yeah, or Jordan Natai, or, you know, someone you don't want to run into. They did beat the Saints this past weekend, though. That was on Saturday, is that first win. So they'd lost their first 6 home games in a row, and then they beat the Saints. I think they did play a lot of, it might have even been like because of some of the stuff that they region's been through, that they played quite a few of road games to start the season. I think that they do actually finish with 4 home games in a row because they got the Tuatara. They've played 2 home games in a row. Finally got their first win at the 7th attempt last weekend. They play the Tuatara this week, so probably not going to win that. And then they play the Manawatu Jets, who are also going to be contending for top 6. Don't think, I would like to see it happen because I do like that Hawke's Bay team, but I don't think they're making the playoffs.
Maybe they need a pitch invader or 2, so we don't encourage it, but who knows? It's tough times, you got to do what you got to do. That is the Niche Cast for today. Big up yourself, love yourself. Kia kaha, stay beautiful, church.